In the heart of Antebellum, South Carolina, where the soil drank the blood of the oppressed, men and women vanished not into freedom's embrace, but into an abyss of silence. No chains broken, no midnight flights, just erased, as if God himself had turned his gaze away in judgment. But what if their disappearance was a cry for divine justice, echoing through the halls of eternity? Tonight, we unearth the horror that no grave could contain. The fog clung to the banks of the Ashley River like a shroud, heavy with the weight of unspoken sins. It was September 1857, and the air in Charleston County carried the faint, acrid tang of burning cotton stalks from distant fields, a reminder that harvest time was both a bounty and a curse. Riverside Plantation sprawled across 300 acres of fertile lowcountry soil, its grand white columns rising like bleached bones against the verdant backdrop. To the casual eye, it was a bastion of southern prosperity, where Nathaniel Hartley reigned as master, his ledgers fat with profits from the white gold that fueled an empire built on human toil. But beneath the surface, something festered, a darkness that swallowed lives whole, leaving no trace but the hollow ache of absence. This was no tale of rebellion or escape, these were souls that simply ceased to be, as if plucked from existence by an unseen hand, perhaps the very finger of Providence pointing toward retribution. Elias Thorne was a man forged in the quiet fires of precision and solitude. At 34, he had carved out a life in the dim recesses of the Charleston County Tax Assessor's office, where the world reduced itself to neat columns of ink on yellowed parchment. While his peers chased fleeting pleasures in the gaslit taverns of King Street, Thorne found solace in the unyielding logic of numbers. They didn't lie, didn't betray, they simply revealed patterns, like constellations in a night sky. His desk, cluttered with quills and ledgers, was his sanctuary, illuminated by the slanting rays of afternoon sun that pierced the tall sash windows, casting long shadows that danced like specters across the floorboards. On that fateful Thursday, as the clock tower chimed 3, Thorne's routine unraveled. He was midway through the annual tax assessments, his fingers stained black from hours of notation. The process was rhythmic, almost meditative: unfold the dossier, scan the acreage, appraise the structures, tally the livestock. Count the enslaved, those legally deemed chattel, their lives distilled to cold inventory. Riverside's file slid across his desk, unassuming as a forgotten prayer. 300 acres hugging the river's bend, valued at $12,000. Cotton yields impressive, taxes remitted promptly. Enslaved count, 43 souls. He nearly stamped it approved, but a whisper of unease halted him, a prickling at the nape of his neck, as if an invisible watcher urged him to look deeper. It was the number 43. It echoed in his mind like a tolling bell, familiar yet discordant. Thorne rose, his chair scraping against the worn pine floor, and approached the towering oak cabinets that guarded the county's secrets. The office was emptying, clerks murmured farewells, their footsteps fading into the humid evening. Alone now, with only the ticking of the wall clock for company, he extracted the prior year's files for Riverside. Dust motes swirled in the dying light as he laid them out: 1853, 43. 1854, 43. 1855, 43. 1856, 43. And now, 1857, again, 43. Thorne sank back, his brow furrowed like furrowed earth. In his years of service, plantations were living entities, their populations ebbing and flowing like the tides of the Ashley. Births brought new entries, fragile lives marked with hope or despair. Deaths claimed others, fever's grip, the lash's toll, the relentless grind that wore bodies to dust. Sales shuffled names across ledgers, auctions scattering families like autumn leaves. A fluctuation of 3 to 7 was the norm, 10 not uncommon. But this stasis? It defied nature, defied probability. It was as if time itself had frozen at Riverside, preserving a facade while something insidious churned beneath. Compelled by an inner compulsion, perhaps the stirrings of divine curiosity, Thorne retrieved his private journal, a leather-bound tome hidden in his desk drawer. Here, he chronicled anomalies, patterns that whispered of hidden truths. Cross-referencing Riverside against neighbors, Blackwood Estate, 310 acres to the north, populations danced from 39 to 48 over 5 years. Riverbend, eastward, 32 to 44. Cypress Grove, akin in scale, 41 to 53. Each showed the pulse of life, the inevitable variance. Riverside alone stood immutable, a statistical ghost. But Thorne delved deeper, pulling the supplemental inventory's detailed rosters not always mandated but often filed by meticulous owners like Hartley. These listed not mere numbers, but names, ages, roles, flesh and blood rendered in bureaucratic script. And here, the veil tore. In 1854, a field hand named Josiah, 36, strong of back. By 1856, gone and replaced by Elijah, 35, same duties. A cook, Miriam, 29, vanished between 1855 and 1857, in her stead, Lydia, 28. Thorne's quill flew, cataloging 21 such substitutions over the span. Names erased, others inscribed, yet the total anchored at 43. It evoked a merchant's stockroom, replenishing wares to maintain illusion. But these were not commodities, they were bearers of God's image, souls entangled in the web of sin that was slavery. As twilight deepened, Thorne's candle flickered, casting grotesque shadows on the walls. He scoured ancillary records, sales deeds, mortality logs, matrimonial bonds, transfers, even runaway notices in the Charleston Mercury. Nothing. No trace of the vanished. The bell tower struck 9, then 10, jolting him from his trance. Locking the office, he stepped into the cobblestone streets, the night air thick with jasmine and the distant cry of a whippoorwill, a bird said to herald lost souls. His mind raced, negligence? Fraud? Or something graver, a breach of moral law that invited heavenly wrath? Thorne's lodgings on Broad Street were modest, a second-floor room in a Georgian townhouse overseen by widow Amelia Hargrove, a stern guardian of decorum. Climbing the creaking stairs, he ignited his lamp, its warm glow illuminating the sparse furnishings, a narrow bed, a washstand, his desk piled with pilfered notes. Spreading the papers, he pondered the spiritual undertones. Was this Hartley's hubris, playing God with lives? The Bible spoke of such reckonings, Pharaoh's hardened heart, the plagues that followed. Thorne, raised in a Methodist household, felt a stirring. Perhaps he was called to be the instrument of exposure, unveiling sins hidden in plain sight. Yet doubt not. Anomalies alone weren't proof. He needed corroboration, eyes beyond ledgers. Fate, or Providence, would soon provide. Reverend Elias Hawthorne was a vessel of quiet grace amid the storm of human bondage. Born in 1810 to Vermont farmers whose faith was as rugged as their land, he had heeded a call southward in 1840, drawn to the shadowed plantations where spiritual famine raged. Not a firebrand abolitionist, that path led to exile or worse, he navigated the treacherous currents of Southern society with the wisdom of serpents and the harmlessness of doves. At 48, his frame was wiry, hair silvered like frost on autumn grass, eyes deep-set with the sorrow of witnessed atrocities. His ministry was tactile, baptisms in muddy creeks, eulogies over shallow graves, whispers of scripture to the afflicted. Hawthorne's rounds wove through Charleston County's labyrinth of estates, where he bridged divides with messages carried like sacred relics. It was during a Sabbath gathering at Elmwood Plantation in October 1857 that the first thread unraveled. The chapel was a weathered shack, its rough-hewn benches filled with 40 weary souls, their faces etched with guarded hope. Hawthorne's sermon on the prodigal son hung in the air, a parable of redemption amid irredeemable chains. As the assembly dispersed, an elder woman, Clara, approached, her shawl drawn tight against the chill wind rustling the palmettos. "Reverend," she murmured, her voice a rasp from years bent over tobacco rows, "a moment, if you please." They stepped into the lee of an ancient oak, its roots twisting like veins of buried anguish. Clara's eyes, clouded but fierce, met his. "My kin, Jacob over at Riverside. No word in nigh on 18 months. He's my sister's boy, bought by Mr. Hartley in '53. Hawthorne nodded, familiar with the fragile lifelines of family news. "When last you heard?" "Winter '56. He spoke of the river's bend, how the water sang at night, like angels weeping. Courted a lass at neighboring Brookside, passes granted monthly. Then, silence. Her gnarled hands clenched. We inquired through chains of kin, got told no Jacob ever labored there. Like he was a ghost, never born." The word struck Hawthorne like a lash. Denial of existence? If sold or deceased, propriety demanded acknowledgement. This erasure smacked of deeper malice, perhaps a sin against the soul's sanctity. "I'll seek truth," he assured, though unease coiled in his gut, reminiscent of Job's trials. Where was God in such voids? In the weeks that followed, as leaves turned crimson like spilled blood, Hawthorne attuned his ears to the undercurrents. At a midweek prayer at Laurel Hill, a carpenter named Isaac confided, "My uncle, Caleb, smith at Riverside." Messages flowed steady till summer '55. Said the master had a secluded barn, far from quarters, folks taken there returned broken, spirits shattered, or not at all. Whispered of screams muffled by night, experiments unholy. Isaac's voice dropped. Last word, fear gripped the place. Then, vanished. Claimed runaway, but Caleb? Family man, rooted deep. No. Hawthorne's ledger grew: Jacob, Caleb, Miriam, Tobias, Esther, Luke, Naomi, 9 names, 9 voids ripping through kin networks. Each story mirrored: arrival at Riverside, brief communications, abrupt cessation, denials. Or flimsy tales of sales to distant states, no papers to substantiate. The pattern evoked biblical plagues, a divine scourge on a land steeped in iniquity. Was Hartley the Pharaoh, his plantation Egypt, the missing the firstborn claimed in judgment? By December, with Yuletide's hollow cheer contrasting the enslaved's muted observances, Hawthorne resolved to act. His Charleston quarters were sparse, a single room above a livery, where he penned letters by candlelight. But testimony from the voiceless held no sway in courts of men. He needed an ally in the temporal realm. The missive reached Thorne on a frost-laced January morn in 1858. "Mr. Thorne, whispers suggest your scrutiny aligns with mine. A meeting, perchance, on matters of grave import?" Signed, Reverend Hawthorne. They convened at a discreet tea-room on Meeting Street, amid the clink of porcelain and murmur of merchants. Hawthorne, clad in somber frock coat, wasted no preamble. Riverside's shadows deepen. Families grieve lost ones erased, not escaped. Thorne's heart raced: synchronicity, or heavenly orchestration? He unveiled his journal, charts of stasis amid flux, names vanishing like mist. Hawthorne shared tales, humanizing the data: Jacob's laugh, Caleb's forged songs. Correlations snapped into place, 7 names overlapped, disappearances syncing with inventory shifts. "This transcends ledgers," Hawthorne intoned, his voice laced with prophetic fire. "Its souls unaccounted, perhaps martyred in secret rites. The scriptures warn, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. But we must be his hands." Thorne, stirred from his agnostic haze, nodded. Property laws bind them as goods, but morality demands reckoning. Their alliance forged, the duo labored in secrecy. Thorne mined archives, deeds pristine, taxes impeccable, yet no sales, no deaths recorded, avoid screaming complicity. Hawthorne traversed muddy lanes, gathering whispers: a seamstress's brother, gone after witnessing the barn's horrors, a field hand's. Thorne, stirred from his agnostic haze, nodded. Property laws bind them as goods, but morality demands reckoning. Their alliance forged, the duo labored in secrecy. Thorne mined archives, deeds pristine, taxes impeccable, yet no sales, no deaths recorded, avoid screaming complicity. Hawthorne traversed muddy lanes, gathering whispers: a seamstress's brother, gone after witnessing the barn's horrors, a field hand's wife, vanished mid-pregnancy, claimed sold to Georgia sans trace. By February, 25 cases emerged, timelines weaving a tapestry of terror spanning a decade. The barn loomed in tales, an isolated structure, shrouded in willows, where Hartley allegedly conducted improvements, experiments blending pseudoscience with cruelty. Whispers of surgeries without mercy, bodies altered for efficiency, failures discarded like refuse. Spiritual symbolism abounded: the barn is Gehenna, valley of slaughter, the missing is offerings to Moloch, god of gain. "We confront authority," Thorne urged in a lamplit rendezvous. Sheriff Elias Beaumont, stern but uncorrupt. Hawthorne concurred, though wary. Evidence thin as scripture's veil, but faith moves mountains. March brought resolve. They compiled dossiers, Thorne's graphs, irrefutable anomalies, Hawthorne's narratives, poignant pleas from the marginalized. Seeking audience with Beaumont, whose office overlooked the bustling harbor, they entered on a blustery afternoon. Beaumont, 54, barrel-chested with a gaze like tempered steel, eyed them warily. "State your piece, gentlemen." They unfolded the saga: statistical impossibilities, erased existences, familial anguish. Charts splayed, stories voiced, 25 souls, potentially more, vanished into Riverside's maw. Beaumont leaned back, pipe smoke curling like doubt. Grave claims against a pillar like Hartley. Enslaved whispers? Flimsy as fog. But the records, Thorne pressed. No documentation, tax fraud at minimum, murder at worst. Hawthorne invoked the divine, ignore this, and we court judgment. These are God's children, their cries ascending. Beaumont pondered, the room heavy with tension. Outside, thunder rumbled, as if heaven concurred. Finally, I'll probe discreetly. But tread light, stir a hornet's nest, and it stings all. As they departed, rain lashed the streets, washing away illusions. The investigation kindled, but the true horror awaited, revelations that would shatter souls, exposing not mere vanishings, but a plantation where science and sin intertwined, bodies broken in pursuit of perfection, discards buried in unmarked earth. Yet in this darkness, glimmers of redemption stirred, two men's quest, perhaps ordained, to drag secrets into light, where divine justice could finally fall. The air grew thicker as whispers spread, families clinging to hope amid dread. Thorne lay awake nights, visions of spectral figures haunting his dreams, accusing eyes, pleading for remembrance. Hawthorne prayed fervently, seeking strength against the encroaching evil. Riverside's facade cracked, but the core pulsed with malevolence, a testament to humanity's capacity for abomination under the guise of progress. What lay in that barn? Instruments of torture disguised as medical marvels? Hartley, a man educated in northern universities, rumored to dabble in phrenology and anatomy, viewing slaves as canvases for his twisted enlightenment. Each disappearance a failed enhancement, limbs severed for study, minds shattered by opium-laced trials, remains consigned to the river's depths, where catfish feasted on forgotten flesh. Spiritual chills deepened. Was this Hartley's pact with darkness, trading souls for earthly gain? The Bible echoed, "What profit a man to gain the world and lose his soul?" Family's grief became a chorus of lamentation, akin to Rachel weeping for her children. As Beaumont's deputies neared, tension mounted. One night, an informant from Riverside slipped word, "The master knows. He's burning papers, silencing tongues." Peril loomed, but resolve hardened. In this crucible, Thorne and Hawthorne transformed clerk to crusader, minister to militant. Their bond, forged in fire, symbolized unlikely alliances against systemic sin. Yet the revelations ahead would test faith's limits, unveiling atrocities that begged the question, in a land of bondage, who truly escaped divine retribution? The spring of 1858 bloomed across Charleston County like a false promise, petals unfurling in vibrant mockery of the decay that lurked beneath. Dogwoods painted the landscape in whites and pinks, their branches arching like skeletal fingers toward a sky heavy with unspoken judgments. The air hummed with the buzz of insects and the distant calls of field hands, a symphony of labor that masked deeper dissonances. In the sheriff's office, a sturdy brick edifice scarred by years of coastal storms, the atmosphere thickened with the scent of pipe tobacco and aged leather. Sheriff Elias Beaumont paced the worn floorboards, his boots thudding like the heartbeat of impending reckoning. At 54, with a frame solid as an oak and eyes sharpened by decades of peering into human shadows, he had navigated the treacherous waters of Southern law with a pragmatism that bordered on cynicism. But now, confronted by Elias Thorne's meticulous charts and Reverend Elias Hawthorne's impassioned pleas, doubt cracked his resolve like lightning splitting a tree. Thorne and Hawthorne had laid their case bare, 25 souls vanished from Riverside's ledgers, no traces in sales, deaths, or flights. Names erased like sins from a confessional ledger, replaced seamlessly to maintain the illusion of 43. It evoked the biblical tale of Cain, where was Abel? Where were these brothers and sisters, swallowed by the earth? Beaumont drummed his thick fingers on the oaken desk, the rhythm echoing his inner turmoil. Politically, this was a minefield. Nathaniel Hartley was no mere farmer but a scion of old blood, his roots entwined with Charleston's elite. Yet the anomalies nodded Beaumont's sense of order, whispering of tax fraud at best, something infernal at worst. "Gentlemen," Beaumont rumbled, his voice gravelly from years of barking orders, "you've painted a picture darker than a moonless night. Numbers don't lie, but they don't testify in court either. And Reverend, your tales of grieving. Kin heart-wrenching, sure, but in these parts, they carry the weight of whispers in the wind." Thorne, his clerk's attire crisp despite the humidity, spread his documents like holy scrolls. Sheriff, observed the stasis, 7 years, unyielding at 43. Comparable estates fluctuate like the tides, births swelling rolls, deaths carving voids. But Riverside? A statistical specter. And the inventories, names shift like sands, yet the sum endures. 23 gone, 23 supplanted. No bills of sale in county vaults, no mortality certificates, no runaway broadsides in the Mercury or Courier. Hawthorne leaned forward, his silver hair catching the lantern's glow like a halo of righteous fire. These aren't mere entries, Sheriff. They're God's children, Henry, with his mother's eyes, Ruth, who pens secret psalms. Families rend their garments in lament, seeking closure denied. Scriptures warn, the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. What if this is divine exposure, the scales tipping toward justice? Beaumont's brow furrowed, the lines deep as plow furrows. You're suggesting vanishings without trace? Hartley selling off-grid, or worse? He paused, the room silent save for the tick of a grandfather clock, measuring moments like grains in an hourglass of fate. Risky ground. Hartley's kin to half the gentry. Accused without ironclad proof, and will all swing from political gibbets. Thorne pressed, frame it fiscal evaded taxes on undocumented transactions. Your purview, unassailable. Hawthorne added softly, and for the souls? Even if law blinds itself, providence sees. Provide answers, Sheriff, ease the widow's weeping. Beaumont rose, gazing through the grimy window at the bustling street below, carriages clattering, vendors hawking wares, oblivious to the moral maelstrom. A church bell tolled in the distance, a somber knell that stirred his lapsed faith. Fine. I'll ride to Riverside. Routine audit, nothing more. But if Hartley's clean, this ends. No crusades. As Thorne and Hawthorne departed, a chill wind rattled the panes, as if spirits approved their pact. Beaumont felt the weight of unseen eyes, perhaps the vanished, pleading from beyond. This was no mere inquiry, it was a descent into potential damnation. 3 days hence, Beaumont dispatched a courier, inspection imminent. The road to Riverside twisted through ancient woodlands, pines whispering secrets to the wind. Mid-April sun dappled the path in golden shadow, evoking the duality of light and dark in every soul. Beaumont rode astride his bay mare, Deputy Harlan Voss at his side, a lanky youth of 28, with keen eyes and a notebook ever ready. Voss was no talker, but his silence was a sponge, absorbing details like parched earth drinks rain. The plantation's gate loomed, Riverside etched in weathered script, vines creeping like sins unchecked. The drive, flanked by budding magnolias, led to the manor, a federal-style sentinel, whitewashed walls gleaming under the sun, green shutters like watchful eyes. Dismounting, Beaumont noted the stable lad, a boy of perhaps 14, ebony skin taut over thin limbs, gaze fixed on the dirt as he took the reins. No spark of youth, just mechanical obedience, a harbinger. Nathaniel Hartley emerged on the veranda, a figure of restrained elegance. 56, with hair thinning to silver threads and a physique honed by intellect rather than toil, his sharp features bespoke a mind that dissected the world like a surgeon's blade. Attired in somber wool and linen, he extended a hand, cool as river stone. Sheriff Beaumont, Deputy. An unannounced visit? Hope no calamity brews. Routine, Mr. Hartley, Beaumont assured, his tone even as a judge's gavel. County audit on records. Mind if we converse inside? The parlor exuded modest affluence, polished mahogany, Persian rugs faded by time. Through an archway, a library beckoned, shelves groaning under tomes of anatomy, botany, galvanism. Beaumont's gaze lingered. Scholarly pursuits? Hartley smiled faintly, a curve without warmth. The mind's harvest outstrips the fields. My departed wife savored society, I, solitude with volumes. Refreshments? Lemonade, perhaps? None needed. To business, your tax filings show 43 enslaved, unchanging for years. Peculiar stability. Hartley's posture stiffened imperceptibly. Fortune favors the prepared. I acquire prime workers, adults, robust. Modern methods, crop rotation, ergonomic tools. Minimizes attrition. Yet no deaths logged? No sales? A handful passed, replacements procured. Documentation, with my solicitor, Elias Pettigrew in Charleston. Estates, liens, protracted affairs. Beaumont nodded, but suspicion coiled like a serpent in Eden. Tour the grounds? Intrigued by your innovations. A flicker in Hartley's eyes, wariness? Certainly, though commonplace. Outside, the air carried the earthy tang of turned soil, mingled with distant wood smoke. Fields stretched, young cotton shoots piercing the red clay like emergent prayers. Workers dotted the vista, 8 in the northern plot, hoeing with rhythmic precision, 6 eastward, bent in supplication to the crop. Too few for 300 acres, Beaumont mused. Quarters loomed a cluster of cabins, thatched roofs sagging like weary shoulders, chimneys puffing despite the warmth. Mind inspecting a cabin? Protocol. Hartley's jaw clenched, a vein pulsing like suppressed fury. Their sanctums, sheriff. Disruptive. Swift verification of counts. A stare-down ensued, charged as thunderclouds. Hartley relented, proceed. The first cabin, dim, earthen floor chill underfoot, air stale with despair. In the corner, a woman huddled, mid-30s, perhaps, frame frail, eyes vacant as abandoned wells. She rocked subtly, murmuring inaudible litanies. Delilah, Hartley intoned. Afflicted by ague. Physician's care. Beaumont knelt, voice gentle, ma'am? No response, her gaze piercing through him to some abyss. Not fever, this was a soul fractured, perhaps by torments echoing Job's afflictions. Another hut, an elder, leg swathed in linen, crusted with old blood. He flinched at their entry, averting eyes like one who had beheld the forbidden. Ezekiel. Mill mishap. Mending. The bandages were neat, but the man's tremor spoke volumes, fear etched deeper than scars. Your doctor? Beaumont queried. Dr. Harlan Voss, no relation to my deputy, from town. Bi-weekly visits. Plausible, yet the pall over the quarters thickened. Inhabitants averted gazes, voices muted to ghosts. This wasn't mere subjugation, it was a collective haunting, as if the plantation drank their spirits, leaving husks. Assemble all for headcount, Beaumont demanded. Hartley balked, scattered labors. I wait. An hour dragged, figures emerging from shadows like summoned wraiths. Beaumont tallied, 39. Short 4. Errands, infirmity, remote tasks, Hartley countered smoothly. Records here? Sales, deaths? With Pettigrew. The impasse hardened. As they remounted, Beaumont spied it, westward, veiled by cypresses, a squat stone edifice, moss-cloaked, emanating disuse or deception. That structure? Hartley's facade splintered, a flash of dread, raw as exposed nerve. Relic icehouse. Dilapidated, hazardous. Demolition pending. Inspect? Unsafe. Liability. Insistence met refusal, a standoff pregnant with unspoken accusations. Beaumont withdrew, but the seat of certainty rooted, Hartley guarded more than ice. Riding away, Voss broke silence, uncanny, sheriff. Like walking graves. Beaumont murmured. Something festers. We forge chains of proof now. Next dawn, in his office, Beaumont convened with Thorne, Hawthorne, and Voss. Lamplight danced on walls papered with faded maps, the scent of coffee bitter as regret. Hiding depths, Beaumont declared. Explanations slick as oil, but the eyes, terror absolute. Hawthorne's voice trembled, souls in torment. Like the possessed, silenced by demons. Thorne analyzed, count off, excuses pat. But cumulative? Fraudulent facade. Voss added, that icehouse, his fear palpable. Beaumont nodded, resolve stealing. Warrant demands cause. We gather more, Pettigrew's ledgers, discreet queries. This ain't oversight, it's orchestrated oblivion. As rain pattered outside, symbolizing heavenly tears, the quartet plotted. Thorne would scour archives anew, Hawthorne, whisper networks, Voss, shadow Hartley. Beaumont pondered the spiritual chill,
Was Riverside a modern Babel, Hartley defying divine order? The vanished martyrs, their absence a clarion for judgment?
Tensions mounted, rumors rippled through enslaved communities, hope flickering like candles in wind. Yet peril loomed, Hartley's gaze turned watchful, his isolation deepening.
One night, an anonymous note arrived, the stone household screams. Beware the master's science.
The investigation deepened, peeling layers like onion skins, each revealing fouler rot. Hartley's library hinted at forbidden knowledge, vivisections, eugenics whispers from European tomes.
Was he experimenting, bodies as clay for his godless molding? Biblical echoes resounded, "Thou shalt not kill," yet here, lives extinguished in pursuit of profane perfection. Families clung to faith, praying for revelation.
Thorne dreamed of ledgers bleeding ink-like
blood. Hawthorne preached veiled sermons on lost sheep.
Beaumont, sleepless, stared at stars, questioning if this was his Damascus road, conversion from enforcer to avenger.
The abyss stared back, promising horrors that would shatter illusions of southern civility. What lurked in that icehouse? Instruments of agony, remnants of the erased?
As alliances strengthened, so did the spiritual undercurrent. This was no mere crime, but a confrontation with evil, where redemption demanded courage and justice, perhaps divine intervention. The humid veil of May 1858 draped Charleston County like a funeral pall, the air thick with the scent of blooming jasmine mingled with the faint rot of lowcountry swamps. Thunderheads gathered on the horizon, grumbling like the voice of an angry deity, promising a deluge that might wash away sins or unearth them. In Sheriff Elias Beaumont's office, the lantern's flicker cast elongated shadows on the walls, transforming the room into a confessional where truths too heavy for daylight were confessed. Beaumont, his face etched with the weariness of a man who had stared into too many abysses, paced before Thorne and Hawthorne, the unlikely trinity bound by a quest for justice. Deputy Harlan Voss lingered in the corner, his notebook a silent witness to the unfolding saga.
"Suspicions alone won't chain the devil," Beaumont growled, his voice rough as gravel under boot.
"We need ironclad cause for a warrant, something a judge can't dismiss as smoke." Hawthorne, his eyes burning with the fire of Old Testament prophets, leaned forward, hands clasped as if in prayer.
"How then?"
Hartley barricades himself behind wealth and whiteness, the law his shield.
"But remember Pharaoh, his heart hardened until plagues forced revelation."
"Perhaps we are the rod of God, striking at his secrets." Thorne, ever the analyst, nodded, his fingers tracing invisible ledgers in the air.
"Testimony. Not whispers, but sworn words from one whose voice echoes in courts.
Enslaved tongues are silenced by statute, we need a white witness, unassailable."
Beaumont halted, his gaze distant.
"Riverside's anomaly, no overseers, no white hands but Hartley's. He rules alone, a solitary king in his fiefdom of fear.
No eyes to pry, no mouths to betray." Silence descended, heavy as guilt unconfessed.
Then Hawthorne's voice pierced it, shift the gaze from the plantation to the phantoms. Trace the vanished. If Hartley's tales of sales, deaths, or flights are fabrications, that's the serpent's lie exposed. Deception invites divine scrutiny, as in Eden's garden. Thorne's eyes lit, precisely. Names from inventories, cross-reference against deeds, certificates, notices. Gaps become gashes in his armor. Beaumont added, escape ads, ubiquitous as church bells. Absence screams complicity. Weeks blurred into a relentless hunt, the quartet sifting archives like archaeologists unearthing cursed relics. Thorne haunted courthouses, his quill flying over yellowed pages, no sales logged in Charleston or beyond. Voss combed newspapers, stacks towering like Babel's ruins, no bounties for Riverside's runaways. Hawthorne traversed muddy paths, his clerical collar a passport to whispered confessions at neighboring estates. Patterns emerged, chilling as a grave's embrace. At Blackwood, a matron confided, "Riverside? A name we hush, reverend. Sold their means swallowed by shadows. Better death than that doom." At Riverbend, a grizzled field hand murmured, "Knights carry cries from yonder, human, but twisted." Hartley's hands delving where God forbade, medical mischief. Folks enter, echoes exit. At Cypress Grove, an ancient soul rest, old Hartley, the sire, whips and vanishings his creed. Curse clings like moss, young Nathaniel feeds it fresh blood.
Rumors wove a tapestry of terror, but threads alone didn't bind a case. They evoked biblical woes, Sodom's sins, inviting brimstone. Was Riverside a latter-day Gomorrah, its master inviting heavenly fire? Then, Providence cracked the impasse.
Dr. Harlan Voss, no kin to the deputy, yet fate's ironic twist, arrived at Beaumont's threshold, his physician's bag clutched like a talisman against evil. Mid-40s, with a practice polished by Charleston's elite, his face bore the pallor of sleepless vigils. "Sheriff," he began, voice steady but eyes haunted, "word of your Riverside probes reached me.
Conscience compels confession."
Beaumont gestured to a chair, the wood creaking like judgment's gavel.
"Speak." Voss exhaled, as if expelling demons.
3 years passed. Hartley hired me bi-weekly visits for his workforce.
Lucrative, routine. But anomalies accrued. Injuries defying plantation perils, incisions precise as a draftsman's line, wounds deliberate, not accidental.
Patients petrified, not wary, but soul-shattered.
Did you confront? Once, a woman's abdomen sliced, stitched expertly yet purposeless. Hartley claimed exploratory forepains, his handiwork, from youthful studies.
But sheriff, such ventures court death without sterile theaters, proper drafts. Risky blasphemy against Hippocrates and God.
Voss's hands quivered, veins like rivers of regret. More followed, accidents masking experiments. Flinching at Hartley's shadow, silence thick as fog.
"I severed ties 2 moons ago, pleading busyness."
Lie. Terror drove me. Why delay report? Vapors of doubt.
Hartley, educated, esteemed.
My word against his? Until your visit stirred echoes of wrongness, I fled.
Beaumont leaned in, documented all. Every scar, every shiver, every suspicion.
Voss nodded, though Virginia calls wife's kin, hospital post. Testimony may traverse borders. Right regardless. Law bends, justice endures. Post-departure, Beaumont pondered, a white witness, credentialed.
Not murder's proof, but deception's veil rent.
Merged with Thorne's anomalies, Hawthorne's laments, nearly warrant-worthy. Yet one shard short, like a mosaic missing its keystone. Fate delivered dreadfully. Mid-May swelter birthed a storm-tossed night, lightning forking the sky like divine fingers accusing the earth.
At Elmwood Plantation, 3 miles north, a figure stumbled from the woods, barefoot, rags shredded by thorns, side seeping crimson through crude stitches.
Isaiah, 23, collapsed by the well, breath ragged as a dying prayer.
Elmwood's residence, shadows in lantern light, bore him to a cabin. Hawthorne, lodging there by serendipity or heavenly design, knelt, his touch gentle as Christ's on the afflicted.
Peace. Son, he soothed. Whence this torment?
Riverside, Isaiah gasped, eyes wild with hell's reflections.
Don't return me. He experiments. Hawthorne's heart thundered, escapee, vessel of truth. Messengers flew for Beaumont and Voss, through the night, Isaiah's tale unraveled in fragments, Payne's punctuation.
Bought 7 months prior from Savannah auction, field toil promised. Initial weeks, grueling yet familiar.
Hartley aloof, not tyrannical. Then, summons to medical hut for check.
The Stonehouse, Isaiah whispered, voice fracturing.
Table with bonds, tools gleaming like fangs.
He strapped me, fed bitter elixir, numbed but aware. Said advancing science, I his contributor. Cut here, he clutched the wound, probing depths, noting reactions.
Payne's map, body's betrayal chronicled. Hawthorne recoiled, bile rising. Biblical horrors flashed, Pharaoh's midwives, Herod's slaughter. How many? Dozens. Some measured, prodded. Others sliced, foreknowledge.
Recoveries in shadows, failures vanished.
Disease or mishap claimed, but we knew, Hartley's handiwork, graves unmarked. Dawn brought Beaumont, Voss inspecting, surgical precision. No mishap, intentional. Beaumont queried gently, notes meticulous. Isaiah's account, Icehouse's innards, journal's horrors. Testify? Fear flickered, my word? Dust in courts. Beaumont, catalyst now. With Voss's eyes, Thorne's proofs, warrant ignites. Voss dispatched for decree, Beaumont ordered surveillance, Shadow Hartley. Flight foils us.
By noon, parchment procured, search sanctioned, Hartley detained.
Judge, swayed by triad of testimony, nodded to heinous probabilities. Beaumont mustered 7 deputies, Thorne for records, Hawthorne for souls.
They rode as sun dipped, shadows stretching like accusatory fingers across rice fields and palmettos. Hartley, in his studied books of anatomy open like forbidden tomes, spied their approach. Composure cracked, calculations whirring like a condemned man's pleas. At the door, sheriff, entourage excessive for courtesy.
Warrant, Beaumont thrust.
Illegal surgeries, deaths concealed.
From whom? Ice in tone. Isaiah escaped.
Voss's suspicions.
Records voids. Families voids. Hartley's mask slipped, fugitives fancy? Preposterous. Step aside. Standoff, hand to holster. Hartley yielded, eyes venomous, search. Regret awaits. Deputies guarded house, cadre to icehouse. Onlookers, enslaved specters, watched, hope and horror mingled, like Israelites eyeing the Red Sea.
Padlock shattered, door groaned open, dank earth, metallic tang of blood, acrid chemicals assaulting senses. Lanterns revealed, central slab, restraints worn by struggles, shelves of vials, blades glinting malevolently, desk piled with tomes. Lord have mercy, Hawthorne breathed. Thorne opened a journal, pallor spread. Chronicles, procedures, results. Human trials, dated, detailed. Beaumont unveiled a crate, salt-packed, limbs preserved, macabre museum. A deputy retched outside. Hawthorne scanned, April 55, Miriam, 28. Limb dissection for musculature. Survived initial, sepsis claimed.
Notes on fiber resilience.
Pages turned, October 56, Caleb, 37.
Neural mapping sans draft, pure response.
Charts of agony thresholds. Volumes?
Beaumont queried.
850 plus entries.
30 souls named, reused like lab rats.
Catalog continued, scalpels, saws, ethers for selective mercy, jars of organs, labeled meticulously, anatomical mural, exquisite yet profane, knowledge stained by suffering. Hartley, escorted in, calm as Judas.
Denial futile. Indeed.
You grasp not my triumphs, medicine advanced through necessity.
Beaumont's jaw set, at cost of souls? This is abomination, Hartley. Divine retribution calls. As irons clicked, thunder crashed, heaven's applause? The vanished found voice in ledgers of horror, their legacy a chilling testament. In pursuit of godhood, man invites damnation. Families would grieve confirmed losses, but justice's will turned, propelled by unlikely avengers. Yet shadows lingered, how deep the curse? Redemption possible in such soil?
The chill of January 1859 gripped Charleston like the cold hand of retribution, frost etching crystalline patterns on windowpanes and cobblestones, as if nature itself mourned the unburied dead. The air carried the sharp bite of impending rain, mingling with the acrid smoke from hearths where families huddled, whispering of the scandal that had scarred the South. Riverside Plantation, once a symbol of genteel prosperity along the Ashley's murmuring banks, now loomed in collective memory as a charnel house, its secrets exhumed like bones from unhallowed earth. Nathaniel Hartley, the architect of its horrors, stood in the dim confines of his cell, his once keen eyes reflecting not remorse, but a defiant gleam, the spark of a man who believed his blade had served a higher calling. Yet as the hour of his execution neared, the spiritual weight of his deeds pressed down, evoking the biblical scales of justice, for with what judgment ye judge, ye shall be judged. In the icehouse's aftermath, as lanterns guttered and shadows danced like accusing phantoms, Beaumont, Thorne, and Hawthorne confronted Hartley amid the relics of his depravity. The air hung heavy with the metallic tang of old blood and the bitter sting of preservatives, a profane alchemy that turned human vessels into specimens. Hartley's voice, steady as a surgeon's incision, pierced the silence. Enlighten yourselves. He swept a manacled hand toward the stacked journals, their leather bindings cracked like parched skin.
Anatomy's veil remains thick, Sheriff. Textbooks offer scraps from hanged felons' cadavers, sporadic, insufficient.
Here, I forged systematic revelation, how tissues yield to trauma, how organs falter under duress, insights no dissection of the willing could yield. Pritchard's face twisted in righteous fury, his clerical collar a stark white against the gloom, voice trembling like thunder over Sinai. You inflicted agony, Hartley. Dismembered souls as if they were beasts in a vivarium. Gods. Image-bearers, reduced to your playthings. Hartley tilted his head, puzzlement etching his features like a faint scar. Subjects, reverend, in service to enlightenment. Their contributions could mend multitudes, surgeries refined, plagues thwarted. Consent? Irrelevant. Property yields no veto. Does the ox query the yoke, the lamb the shear? Legally acquired, ethically deployed, for humanity's ascent. Thorne, his clerk's precision shattered by the visceral horror, clutched a journal, pages whispering accusations. These subjects screamed, bled, begged. Your notes chronicled their torment as data points. Evil cloaked in curiosity. Hartley's gaze hardened, a cold forge where empathy had long been hammered out. Narrow vision blinds you. Posterity will hail me visionary, courageous against convention. A century hence, healers will wield my wisdom, sanitized perhaps, but born here. Beaumont, his sheriff's badge glinting dully, snapped irons around Hartley's wrists, the click echoing like judgment's gavel. Your wisdom reeks of the pit. You're arrested for murder manifold. Trial awaits, then the news. May Providence weigh your soul, for earthly scales tip against you. As deputies dragged him into the night, Hartley twisted, his voice a final barb. Regrets? None. My labors mattered eternal in their yield. The icehouse fell silent, save for the drip of melting frost from the eaves, as if the structure wept for its captives. The men lingered, breaths visible in the chill, spirits burdened by the abyss they'd glimpsed. Hawthorne broke the hush, document all. Each name a psalm of remembrance, lest their anguish fade like mist. They merit graves, not oblivion, testimony against the void. Thorne nodded, fingers already itching for order amid chaos, for trial and eternity. We'll etch their stories in stone. Days blurred into exhaustive revelation, the plantation yielding its buried truths like a reluctant confessor. 17 deaths catalogued in Hartley's meticulous script, experiments fatal by design or complication. 8 more maimed irreparably, limbs severed for study, minds fractured by unrelenting pain. Disposed notations hinted at further cullings, useless vessels discarded, souls dispatched without fanfare. Searches unearthed 4 clandestine pits in shadowed thickets, 12 skeletons bearing surgical scars, ribs pried, viscera explored, bones notched like experimental tallies. Spiritual echoes resounded, Cain's mark, the valley of dry bones awaiting Ezekiel's breath. The 38 survivors, faces gaunt as famine's victims, poured forth tales in hushed cabins, lanterns casting elongated shadows that seemed to recoil from the words. Lydia, a seamstress with eyes hollow as forgotten wells, confided to Hawthorne, we dwelt in dread shadow, reverend. His summons a death knell. Screams pierced the night like banshees, bodies borne out limp as rags. We prayed, not me, Lord, not kin. Survival a curse, witnessing the reapings. Owned utterly, voiceless as lambs to slaughter. The press seized the saga, headlines screaming from Charleston to the frozen north, plantation of horrors. Surgeon's secret atrocities. Editorials probed the moral rot, questioning a system where humans became chattel, ripe for such perversions. Biblical parallels abounded in abolitionist tracts, Hartley as Herod, Riverside as Egypt's killing fields. October's crisp winds ushered the trial into Charleston's courthouse, a neoclassical edifice of white marble veined like exposed flesh. Spectators crammed the galleries, a mosaic of silk cravats and calico dresses, the air electric with anticipation. Prosecutor Elias Crow, sharp-featured and relentless, marshaled evidence like a general arraying troops, journals splayed open, their ink accusations vivid, preserved fragments in jars, mute. Witnesses, burial soil samples, read as Judas's betrayal. Dr. Voss testified, voice steady but hands betraying tremor, injuries bespoke deliberation, incisions exploratory, wounds mapped with clinical detachment. Patients cowered at Hartley's approach, spirits shattered. Isaiah's account riveted the court, his words a litany of suffering, strapped to that slab, elixir blurring edges but not the blade's bite.
He narrated my agony, fascinating resilience here, as if I were clay, not kin-bearer. Escaped by grace, or God's mercy.
Defense counsel Theodore Vance, silver-tongued patrician, countered, legal bounds unbroken.
Property rights absolute, experiments akin to agrarian trials on stock. Morally fraught?
Perhaps.
Criminal? Nay. Visionary Hartley advanced science, methods notwithstanding.
Closing arguments clashed like spiritual swords.
Vance, law is writ, gentleman, not sentiment. No statute bars utilization of assets for progress. Crow rebutted, voice rising like a revivalist's call, concealment betrays guilt, falsified rolls, secret sepulchres. He knew murder's stain. Victims voiceless? Heaven hears.
As scriptures decry, thou shalt not kill.
Judge Harlan Whitaker's charge balanced precariously, property notwithstanding, willful slaying transcends rights. Deliberate death demands reckoning. Deliberation spanned 4 agonizing hours, verdict, guilty, 17 counts. Uproar ensued, cheers mingled with outrage, the courtroom a microcosm of a fracturing nation.
Sentencing solemnity filled the chamber a week hence.
Whitaker, bespectacled and grave, Hartley, your research profaned creation. Humans tortured, documented dispassionately. Limits bind even ownership, cruelty to beasts outlawed, how much more to souls? Death by hanging, 60 days hence. May the Almighty extend what we withhold.
Hartley, impassive as marble, retreated to his cell, penning a treatise amid medical tomes, a final defiance, knowledge's poisoned fruit. Execution dawn, January 15th, frost crisp, skies leaden as guilt. A sparse crowd ringed the gallows, unease palpable among the elite.
Hartley's last words, resonant, condemned for audacity, not iniquity. My probes pierced ignorance's shroud. Posterity will embrace my yields, refined perhaps, but mine in Genesis. The drop, neck snapped, body swaying like a pendulum of fate. Witnesses noted his composure, fearless or soulless. Riverside forfeited to creditors, its enslaved dispersed amid legal tempests. Abolitionists intervened, many reunited with kin.
Isaiah, freed via Quaker conduits, vanished northward, a shadow reclaiming light.
Thorne, transformed from ledger-keeper to liberator, fled south in 1860, joining abolition's ranks, later aiding freedmen post-war.
Hawthorne intensified his ministry, smuggling souls via hidden rails, founding schools amid Reconstruction's ruins, perishing in 1885, faith unbroken.
Beaumont retired, aged by revelations, ensuring victims' reburials with markers, names etched against erasure. His journals pondered, power absolute corrupts utterly. Hartley, no monster, but system's spawn. How many unseen Riversides fester? Hartley's tome sparked ethical firestorms, study or seal?
1861 decree, archived, restricted, knowledge tainted, untouchable.
Pre-war debates invoked Riverside, abolition's indictment of slavery's abyss, defenders' anomaly. Truth, systemic enabler, dehumanization's fruit.
Postbellum scholarship unveiled parallels, covert experiments on the bonded, Riverside's extremity a beacon. Today, subdivision scars the site, manor ash since 1872's blaze, rumored arson by returnees, unproven. Icehouse raised, ground fallow, as if cursed. 1997 memorial, bronze plaque amid former quarters, 17 names enshrined, Miriam, Caleb, et al., plus 43 total, survivors, and vanished. Inscription, here, humanity was dissected for curiosity's sake.
Sufferers silenced by chains. We reclaim their names, decry the evil, vow remembrance. As Proverbs warns, the memory of the just is blessed. Annual vigils, January 15th, descendants recite litanies, reflect on ethics, knowledge's cost, consent's sanctity.
Riverside specter haunts, evil rationalized as progress, curiosity unchecked by compassion. Hartley viewed victims as means, scriptures counter, all bear divine spark.
His greater good echoes false idols, demanding sacrifice without volition. Legacy, vigilance against power's abuse, affirmation of universal dignity.
The vanished, not escaped but eradicated, now eternal witnesses, stones crying out where voices were stilled.